Portions of the following program may be unsuitable for younger or more sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right?
You have been sold a lie.
Let me out! Let me out!
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
I don't know why we leaving Mouse's house. He been good to us. He feed us on Saturday, close us on Sunday, and then beat us on Monday.
This saving my money.
That is the most ridiculous piece of philosophical bullshit I have ever heard.
And the game's over when the white ball drives the black ball completely off the table.
I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along?
He had sex with a white girl, that's what. I say,
I want revenge.
So you must be dangerous.
I want you.
The path to cultural awareness for whites. You know I'm going to say that again. The path to cultural awareness for whites. Most white people in the United States don't think a lot about white culture. They see whiteness as bland if they think about it at all. They often consider themselves to be not white, but a member of the ethnic group of the country that their ancestors left to come to the United States. I'm not white. I'm Italian or Irish or Greek, etc. They seldom think of themselves as white. Some of the whites see white culture through the lens of classic white supremacy, understood mainly as the language, art, and history of the Europeans and post-European peoples, and often simply invented to further supremacist narratives. This is sometimes called culture with a big C. Whiteness, for example, is speaking certain kinds of English, listening to Beethoven, or centralizing ancient Roman history. None of these things are comprehensively or exclusively white, but they are examples of the Eurocentric priorities of those who situate whites at humanity's apex. In this perspective, white cultural awareness means knowing about the European cultures that spawned United States whiteness, usually English and German, and believing them to be both the acme of human culture and under siege in the United States that is becoming increasingly dominated by non-whites. Others of whites see white culture through the lens of anti-racism. They see whiteness as having no culture, but only a constructed system of oppression, devoid of content. In this perspective, white cultural awareness means 1. Perceiving the ubiquity of whiteness, especially white privilege, as a tool of oppression. 2. Striving to abolish whiteness. And 3. Adopting aspects of national or ethnic culture with a big C that one's ancestors left behind in coming to the United States. None of these perspectives, however, accounts for white culture with a small c. Culture with a small c is the aspect of a person's worldview that are culturally determined, the shared assumptions about social interactions, identity, and the nature of reality. Whereas experiencing culture with a big C may be going to a Beethoven concert, culture with a small c prescribes what being on time or late for the concert means socially. whose responsibility it is to pay for the tickets. In fact, the rules for all the social interactions that make up the medium in which we live our lives with others. All groups from cultures, shared assumptions, both conscious and unconscious, about what behaviors and attitudes are the norms for their members. A football team is likely to have very different norms around personal space than a yoga club. The staff of an emergency room is likely to have very different norms about the nature of time than students in an art class. And, of course, national, ethnic, and racial groups often have very different norms from each other. The theorist Gert Hofstede developed an overarching theory of cultures that, with an addition from other theorists, include 5 dimensions. They are individualism versus collectivism, the degree to which the unit of personal identification is with the self, individual, or with the collective, family, group, nation, etc. Power distance, the level of the expected inequalities between those who hold power in the group and those who do not. Uncertainty avoidances, the degree to which members of the culture are comfortable with ambiguous situations and can tolerate uncertainty. Achievement orientation versus relationship orientation, the degree to which achieving goals, success, etc. versus interconnection among people are prioritized. Long-term and short-term orientation, the degree to which long-term concern versus short-term concerns are prioritized. I, like many whites, grew up believing that I didn't have a culture. To me, culture was a quaint thing that other people had instead of having the direct, pragmatic view of the world that I and other white USA Americans have. In fact, the first time a professor of mine began to talk about different cultures, I thought he was being racist because at that time, I believe it was racist to see other people as different. The fact that others may have their own experience of the world that is different from my interpretation of their experience didn't occur to me. Of all of the cultural dimensions, individualism versus collectivism is the most powerful. Individualists tend to believe that each person is the master of her or his own destiny and that her or his actions are all that matters in life. Collectivism sees themselves as part of a larger human system. They are usually more focused on the impact that their actions will have on their collective, their family, for example. They tend to see the way systems impact people's lives more readily than individualists. Individualism has a bad time of its in an anti-racist circle, and with good reasons. Individualists often ignore or deny the impact that systemic racism and ubiquitous negative racial biases have on people of color, as well as the positive impact that white privilege has on them. They use example of their own struggles or their family struggle with adversity as proof that with enough personal persistence, people of color who report differential treatment are blaming others for their own failures. They see examples of success by extraordinary people, Oprah and Obama, for example, as proof that anyone can do it. They fail to recognize that if those few exceptional people from that group are successful, then some system of differential treatment must be in place, or those people would be such exceptions. They fail to understand that if no system of differential racial treatment is in place, it follows naturally that the cause of the different outcome across racial groups would have to be from some form of inferiority, either cultural or genetic, in people of color. If one believes the system is fair, then one must believe that the group that aggregated are inferior. That is racism. Of course, individual decision matters. Individuals can make good or bad decisions within the context of their socioeconomic situation, but all contexts are not created equal. What my fellow anti-racists often miss are the positive of individualism. Individualism means that one doesn't have to subordinate oneself to the needs of the collective, especially when the collective is maladaptive or is asking more of the person than that person can or wants to give. Individualism allows us to enter our own realities in ways that release incredible creativity and innovation. not worrying too much about upsetting the group or the status quo. While it can have a destructive impact, it can also open new doors of knowledge and understanding. My own journey of anti-racism has been a struggle against the teachings and opinions of some of my own family, friends, and race. Individualism, to be sure, must be tempered with awareness, but it is not in and of itself a bad thing, and is at times a great thing. Most importantly, the white anti-racists have lived without a sense of culture with a small c for their entire lives. Often don't understand the depth of its impact on us. The fact that many of them believe that whiteness is only a structure of oppression seems to me to be powerful proof of this. If we are going to attempt to change our and others' worldview, it behooves us to be acutely aware of the actual assumptions that comprise our worldview. We can't possibly do that if we assume that whiteness is only a structure of oppression. Put even more simply, when I'm with other white people or white persons whom I love, something is happening that is both white and not oppressive. It may be occurring within the United States context of white oppression, but it is not necessarily of it. Hey, how's y'all doing? This is Mr. Blows Your Mind, your whiteologist, coming to you with another video. That's right. I'm back again, y'all. Some of y'all not out there doing what you're supposed to do, but I'm going to keep pushing, whether you're there or not. And as I keep moving forward, hopefully many people will recognize what it is I am actually trying to impart to help you to understand why this dynamic that exists between one and the other. Well, this video is the path to cultural awareness for whites. That is what this article is about. But again, the topic is going to be about black homework and white credit. I'm going to say that again. Black people's homework, white people's credit. Ain't that something, right? Right off the bat, a lot of people not going to like that. It's going to turn it off. He's on race. Well, you tell me if it's not about race. Everything from the going back for a certain period of time when another people have intervened, who came as foreigners upon other people who are indigenous, and have always drawn the line in the sand as your side versus my side. Yes, it's a construct. And a lot of people say this is a waste of time. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it is something that needs to be having a discussion on so that people can understand why certain people act the way they do. And this is on both sides. There's some people who will understand this. There were some people who will be feeling abhorred to it, right? They will feel a disdain to what's being said, and they're going to be like a crowd of dogs with somebody throwing a rock and somebody's going to yelp as into their disagreement. But that's what this is about. It's about having dialogues, conversations. Maybe someone will understand the difference between one's perspective versus another. Since I seek for certain things to bring out as topics for that discussion, I found one that is about culture awareness for whites, right? So let's get into it. Now, when you think about it, as the title says, black people's homework, well, think about it like this. A people who have been indigenous to the planet, who's been on for eons, that is uncalculable, as into those who call themselves archaeologists, right? Who dig and sift through the earth trying to discover origins of humanity. But in one aspect, he is doing that. But in another aspect, he's in the quest for his self-identity. Because as a Johnny-come-lately, the world had already been formulated. The world had already been cultured. The world had already had its rituals. You understand? And then you came out of your stupor to come upon people who on appearance were different from you, and based on their traditions and their cultures and their ways that were foreign to you, and you evaluated that on the scale, you had a desire to, take, ravage, pillage, in order to now minimize them and elevate oneself. So when we look at it historically, when we talk about this culture, and that white people in the United States don't think a lot about white culture, because this is the paradigm world we live in, the United States or in the Americas, is because there's a certain people who, when you look at it historically, are a derivative of an older people, but they are branches off the tree, right? There are different branches on that limb that formulate to come a consensus, what they consider to be whiteness in America. But we understand that white in itself is a construct. It was constructed to give an identity for people who primarily historically, depending on what branch of the tree they're coming from, they lost their, what they would consider their wholeness through historical times and, interventions that, what they said, soiled their bloodline, and they're trying to now reestablish a new lineage, severing off the old. It would be like the story of Noah flooding the whole world and starting off rebuilding anew. I'm going to say that again. It would be an analogy. It would be the analogy of Noah's Ark, where the world had been flooded, meaning it got rid of everything that was prior before. Anything that had of antiquity would now be washed away, and it would be Noah and his progenies that will be renewing a new world. This is what we have here in the United States. So, when you look at the white folks in America, they don't think about white cultures because black people had already done the homework. I'll say that again. People of color around the globe had already done the homework. So, let's give an analogy here. Let's say, for instance, a person has a friend who is very studious and studies, does their homework. You, as a person, he's more of a introvert and you are an extrovert. Introvert meaning a person who's more in, and an extrovert is an outwardly person. So the introvert person is at home, it studies, it reads, it's always on time doing its, school curriculums and turning in assignments and all that, participates in that. But the extrovert person, likes to be, involved in, parties and being at the right place at the time where everything is going on, and kind of secondary looks upon that aspect of things. Mindset is not on that. So here's an extrovert and an introvert who are best friends. So the extrovert knows that this introvert that he kicks it with is very studious and does it. So he knows that primarily because they've been boys or girls and they grew up with each other, and what they're going to end up doing is being so good of friends that they look out for each other. Now, in exchange of this relationship, the extrovert does the physical protection. No one can touch that introvert. The introvert is allowed to get into facilities and things on the merit of the extrovert. But when it comes to school and about knowing, the extrovert has to rely on the introvert. So the introvert makes sure that he kind of make sure that the same classes that the introvert is taking, he takes those same classes. Right? That way, he will make sure that his attendance will be in the class. But guess what? When it comes to that homework and taking tests, he relies on the introvert. He sits close by when test taken so that the introvert can help him when he's stuck or her is stuck on a test asking for answers. When it's time to do homework and the extrovert know it didn't do the homework, it will trick the introvert by going into his book bag, taking the homework, erasing the name, putting his name, turning in and trying to get the credit. So, over a span of period of time will be the teacher. The teacher is going to be able to recognize that the work that you're turning in and the test that you're copying is going to be a forgery. So now we're in the age where the teacher is reappearing. And everything is being revealed as to who is been copying whose work. So, what end up happening to the introvert once he get exposed about him being a lying, conniving, cheating individual, is going to be defensive. He's going to be irrational. He's going to try to make ways for the introvert to have a hard time. Because in actuality, the credit that the extrovert has always been taking has been actually the introvert's work. And the introvert has been getting acclamations and pat on the backs and cajoled about all of his so-called success. But the teacher now is going to reveal the true culprit of the crime. Mr. Blowsurmind, what are you talking about? I thought we were talking about... We're getting into that. I'm going to tie these in. Now, white people in the United States don't think about white culture. Why is that? Why is it that white people don't think about culture? Matter of fact, do people of color even think that white people even got a culture in America? Is there really is it the slickness of the tongue? Again, according to scripturally, it says the strongest muscle on the body is the tongue, because the tongue can heal and the tongue can break. I'm going to say that again. The strongest muscle on the body is the tongue. The tongue can heal and the tongue can break. Meaning, the words that are coming out of my mouth, depending on how I'm going to articulate and what I'm going to express, I can use these words to heal people. And the words will soothe and comfort, right? Bring solace to a situation. My words can also turn and be a sword and stab and hurt and maim based on what is being said and espoused. So, white people don't think about culture is because there's a saying that if there was a world banquet and every nation and tribe brought some traditional culture to the banquet, what would the white American bring to the table? Other than security, gun, right? You know, I guess government, right? Chaos, right? Because we don't really know what white culture is. right? And according to the article, it says that whiteness see culture as bland. Now, when you say bland, bland has, different variations to how you're going to say it. But it could be gentle, right? It could be agreeable. It could be affable. Unemotional, right? Undemonstrative. Soulless. Unanimated. Casual. Indifferent. Uncaring. Unresponsive. Dull. Unexciting. Unappealing. Unattractive. Uncolorful. So-so. Mediocre, right? That's why white people don't talk about culture, because they realize that they have always assimilated to the people who they look upon as not so, in the realms of their highness of whiteness, right? But they're throwing in your face how they created and how without them you wouldn't be, or you couldn't function without them, when that is so the furthest of truth. Now again, my tongue is not here to be a sword. It's only going to be a sword if you cannot open your mind and be deal with reality, really, right? So bland also is smooth or soothing, or it is an embarrassment, unperturbed, a confusion of guilt, right? So white people do have a guilt because they know that all the cultures and all the things that they talk about as supposedly white Americans, there is no culture because it is a falsity, right? It is not real. And so when you have people who are in this land who keep providing different avenues and aspects to add to the American culture, but they do not reap the benefits from that culture, and just because you can be the manager, just because you could be the CEO, just because you're the corporation, you didn't bring anything other than the fact that something that when you take it historically back, how did you gain the economics to be able to jump into the position to be able to manage and CEO and all these things that you say without you guys cannot function. The world functioned long before corporations, management, right? Administrations and the so-called modernized governments, right? So, this culture that they know that it's not really a real culture for a white American, because most of them truly understand that they're not white. And they know that white is a construct of something that was created to give an identity, because actually, when they look at them as members of ethnic groups of the country that their ancestors left to come to the United States, and I'm going to say that again, as they know as the members of the ethnic group of the country that their ancestors left to come to the United States, meaning that you all know that ancestral-wise, you're immigrants. So they know when they say, they know I'm not white. They know this because they'll tell you I'm Italian, I'm Irish, I'm Greek, etc. Right? Those are the nationalities of the ancestral lineage that these people are coming from. So they don't think of themselves as white, because white is a construct. It does not really exist. But because of this caste system in America, to make a distinction between one and the other, this is the game that we play in this country. Right? So when you look at historically, the white culture in America is seen through the lens of the classic white supremacy that originate going back in their history. Okay? That's what it does. Right? So has the reemergence of this so-called supremacy, white supremacy, emerged its head again? Today they call it the alt-right. The alt-right. Okay? Now, who is this alt-right that they're talking about? Now, this alt-right, right? Over the last few months, the so-called alt-right has become one of the most prominent factions of the conservative media. And this is what has galvanized in the minds of those people under that paradigm of what they use as unity of the culture, have used this as their, again, tongue is to do what? Soften, right? Words to soothe or want to incite. And so these conservatives of this alt-right have now blown the dog whistle in the ears of those who are part of this cultural, national culture, to action, right? So you see that this alt-right, the concepts that they use will be like white genocide, right? Right? Which is a popular concept. The ideal of white genocide is a conspiracy theory claiming that efforts to increase diversity, right? Often they talk about via immigration, which is funny because, again, historically, you are not an indigenous people to the land. Everybody knows the story, but you have problems with people of immigration, right? And our actually attempts to decrease the white population. That's what they believe. Now, again, if historically, and we look at it through biology, are you really a white person? Yes, you have continued to, mate with white to keep the appearance of a white person. But if we were to take most of you, as they show sometimes when they show that the DNA tree, and the dude had on the kilt, he thought he was a German in the beginning, and then come to find out he had on the kilt, he was more Irish. He couldn't find no Germans in his tree. Well, that's what these people are. They're having people with a notion of mind to believe that they are something that most of them are not. Because through history, many of them have been amalgamated with other, especially like how they've taken the census in 2010, and somehow the people who considered to be Spanish were considered white people. Now, where did that come from? Where did that whole notion of the people from Spain thinking that they could be white, especially in the more modern time? Because we know what happened in 7-Eleven in Spain, right? Right? And it was through that ordeal that a lot of that bloodline got tainted, right? So they have came up with a doctrine later on that they tried to amalgamate themselves with the, I think it was the Visigoth, right? I think it was was it the Visigoth? The Vandals. I mean, that's right. The Swabians and the Vandals had came in there, but they didn't have a problem with that because that's going with the norm of this, again, trying to permeate the world with who is more superior than the other. But in actuality, a lot of that blood had already been crossed. So the purity of any individual trying to consider himself white is fallacious on just biological premises. You can't probably find if there's any percent out there of a pure white so-called person. It does not exist. That's been through history, that has been blemished. Yes, you have started over with your Noah story, and from that forward you go to like 16 straight generations and consider it to be pure white, but in actuality, keep going back and it'll find out that you had been crossed, right? So anyway, with this white genocide aspect of it, that they believe that my immigrations, well, what immigrations are you talking? As long as they have a Eurocentric or European so-called crossing, you never had a problem with it. But now that they realize that these people also are taking away the appearance of whiteness. That's what's really happening here. It is taking away the appearance of whiteness, right? And so the Anti-Defamation League notes that all the alt-right favors propaganda on subjects such as immigration and black crimes as evidence of this ostentable ethnic cleansing of whites. So they're saying that immigration and the black crimes is what is going to be the catalyst for white genocide. This is the foundation that the alt-right uses as to why they are dog whistling them into the code, right? So even Ann Coulter, who is a conservative columnist, right, and she was also a leading Trump supporter, she said that she invoked this notion on Twitter about diversity equals non-white. So when they saying diversity, again, diversity means non-white. White supremacist equals not anti-white. So you see what I'm saying? So they believe that according to their culture, this is preserving, it's only a state of, you know, really it's just a state of vernacular. It's not really something tangible. It is just a thought. Because if you break it down to what it really counts, it's fictitious and phallus in every form and facet. But somebody using this to galvanize a people because of their inferiority, really, it's really their inferiority. And it has a lot to do with this topic that I'm talking about, culture, right? And the indigenous equation that they cannot topple as long as you are the major population. Now, let's get back into it, right? So, now through the lens of their classic white supremacy, those are the catalysts that they use. They even use a term, I think it's called conservatives, right? That too, right? They use those terms too, right? And somebody be like, well, what is that about? What do you mean by a conservative? Well, that's just the branded, that's the ones who they really, they call those are the ones who they consider the leftist whites, right? White people who would be considered nigger lovers, right? Right? These will be the ones that the white people, again, as this story talked about, what I will get to eventually, about against what it says collectivism versus individualism, right? There will be those ones that you see when you see the people who want to go adopt black babies. Those are the ones who are out there in Black Lives Matter, right? Who are out there calling themselves protesting. They call them the conservatives, right? The cuckoids, right? Which is really the husband of an unfaithful wife, right? So they're saying your unallegiance to the nation by selling out and trying to be a nigger lover, right? That's what they're talking about. So when you look at, again, into this so-called culture, right? So this, when they don't want to be stigmatized as being all racist, but to be a white person, the only foundation to it is under the lens of a classic white supremacy, right? And through that white supremacy, how they culture it, right? There's the language, art, and history of Europeans and post-European peoples, right? Which invented to further supremacist narrative. This is how they're establishing their culture to show who's white, right? It is through these venues that those who participate culture with the big C for whiteness, right? These are the criterions that know that you are part of the white paradigm, right? Through this culture, speaking certain kinds of English, right? Certain kinds of English. So let's take it like this. I thought about this. May agree, may disagree. So if England, which is the home of where the Englander is, where English is the child or was birthed from, then those who migrated from there and came here means this is a bastardized type of English, and that means that the slaves were getting the even more third world English, right? But let me show you something, man. Let me show you something. Now, based on what I just said about these different, like, let's say that the slave, accordingly of history, that how they got us coming here. So that means that the ancestors of our people at one time had their own language, right? And that got stripped from them, right? So again, according to what I just said, that if England is the birthplace of English, and those who left from England and established what we call the United States and the Americas, right, spoke a bastardized English, right? What did the slave end up? Now, we know that the bougies and those people who become so-called highly educated and cultured speaks the highly bastardized English, right? But what does the slave speak? And let's talk about this culture, and let's show the creativity of we as the cultured people. Now, accordingly in language, they call it a pidgin, P-I-D-G-I-N. Right? Now, a pidgin is a system of communication which has grown up among people who do not share a common language. Going back to our ancestors, right? Those who did not speak according to the way they spoke, but who want to talk to each other for trading or for other reasons. In this case, it was the communication between master and slave, right? Pidgins have been variously called makeshifts, marginal or mixed language. They have a limited vocabulary, a reduced grammatical structure, and a much narrow range of function compared to the language which gave rise to them. So, you know, when they had us, oh yes, master, when they had us snoop-footing and talking like that, and then even to this day, white people will say, when they try to find that needle in a haystack as a way to try to belittle you, they always go with, you're English, you don't speak proper, you're not educated. Well, guess what? I'm not supposed to be, supposedly, don't mean I don't have the ability to do, but I'm not supposed to be like you fully because I am me, right? But let me show you the power of our people. Now, you know that a lot of people, if I say the word Creole, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, them the people, the French people that you know, there's patois and there's Creole, right? Well, okay. Now, I hear people say that, right? Now, what is Creole? Creole is a pidgin language, right? Creole is like what I just said. So that means that black people, what is the Creole of America? Creole of America became what we or they term slang, and then they try to later on could call it, what they would try to call it, Ebonics, right? Let me show you something here. Let's show you who is a bad mama jamma, right? So a Creole is a pidgin language which has become the mother tongue of a community. Uh-oh. I'm going to break it down for you, for all them people who sit there and try to act like that when they say this particular word that I'm going to end up talking about, they try to say it's everybody. But no. Listen to what it says. The mother tongue of a community, a definition which emphasizes the pidgin and Creoles are two stages in a single process of linguistic development. First, within a community, increasing number of people begin to use the pidgins as their principal means of communication. Now, what are you talking about, Mr. Blows Your Mind? What I'm about to show you is a people who were the third world English learned from our forefathers and parents, right? Our ancestors in this land spoke a pidgin. A Creole pidgin ended up being developed out of that that hit around about late 79s, 80. That we changed the way that we communicated with each other. When we used to talk, there used to be a time when white people didn't even understand none of the vernaculars and the verbiage that were coming out of our mouths. That we always seem to tend to give people away so that we could never communicate without them knowing. So we took that language, that bastardized language, and we created a new vocabulary that became an American Creole that came into a music form that you call today hip-hop. Don't you understand why they had to destroy the culture of hip-hop? Because you created something out of nothing, and this is who we are. They have no culture. You are what it is. Do you get it? You are what it is. And this is why they always putting their foot on your neck, is because they have to stop you, because you can create anything when you put your mind to it that they cannot stop. Huh? Let's keep going here. That was something for you to drop some of those like that, because that's what it is. You took that pigeon, because again, some people will say when they talked about those who were the so-called patty rollers and those who were the overseers, they could not speak the Queen's English, so they had the gutter country bastardized. So when they said nigger, that's like right, that grunt in it. And so if you learn your English and he's supposed to be superior to you, and you is just trying to communicate, you're not gonna sound like him. And so they try to make fun of the way you talk. So we went through this history over history that we built from this bastardizedness, and we formulated it from a pigeon to a Creole to hip-hop. See? And to show you this, when they talk about what they call whiteness culture, the big C, they're speaking certain kinds of English. Well, they're only speaking certain kinds of English. We took the Queen's English, the Master's English, and we formulated it to an art form and put music behind it with rhythmic, you understand, that you can only emulate. And so when there was the opportunity to use it as a dog whistle, that's where they knew you had to stop this. See, because they were listening to Beethoven, right, as part of a high culture. Well, think about hip-hop. Hip-hop could have been, and can still go back to being a high culture, but there's so much damage been done in it. There's so much filth in it. It is so sick that it's going to need some surgery done to gut it out. But one thing about they talking about they listen to the Beethoven, under my research, I found out that Beethoven was a black man. Was Beethoven a black man? Don't give me the picture. Don't give me the picture if you ain't took no picture, because that's another thing. They quick at making statues and drawings, right? But yet you can't get no pet statues and drawings of the people prior, other than what's in Egypt, as there was no other things going on. There was no artists. There was nobody who could draw to draw Jesus. There was nobody there to paint. You understand? We understand what you're doing here. All right? So listening to Beethoven is high culture for whiteness. Centralizing ancient Roman history. So you understand that this is a Roman culture. You could just go in there and look. You see the fasces on the sides when they're going into those, and when you go in there, you see them at the podium. You see to the left and the right. You see the fasci signs right there, right? So, Eurocentric priorities, right? This is what situates whites at a humanity's apex. It is their priorities, what they believe makes them superior. And it puts them in the position. So they believe that what white culture awareness means knowing about European cultures that spawned out of the U.S. whiteness, right? The people who came from England and that prior to England was from so-called Germany, again, as they came down upon everybody, if you've seen the last video. Now, they say the acme of human culture, what they consider themselves to be the acme, right? You know, remember on Bugs Bunny, everything he was getting was from acme, which is the pinnacle of all, right? That was the best of the best when you get acme. So that's what they're saying. They are the epitome of human culture. Really? Come on, man. Stop it. But they believe they are under threat. This is what this alt-right is all about. Because they believe that they're under siege in this country, and because it is becoming increasingly dominated by non-white people. Now, how did that happen? How is that possible that immigration has caused so much detriment when black people aren't the ones immigrating people in here? See, somebody sold you this bad bill of goods thinking that this was a way that y'all could use, a way to keep them from ever elevating and using their faculties and coming together to unify and be able to isolate themselves and come up with new ways and cut you out because they were getting smarter. You can't be in a place for so long period of time and not get smarter. This is where the thread is at, y'all. You're getting smarter. You're understanding how to start to use the system. You want to start being political. You want to start using black economics. You want to start building. You want to start isolating. You want to build your own community and cut off that wealth. That's dangerous. You understand? That is dangerous to them. So, they said others of whites see white culture through the lens of anti-racism. Right? There's a segment of white people who only see that whiteness can only be attributed to the construct system of oppression. That is your culture. What other culture is there other than killing, destroying, stealing, manipulating? What else is there? Managing, cooperating, warring. That's it. Give me something else. There is nothing else. Right? There is nothing else. So, the ubiquity of whiteness, especially white privilege, is a tool of oppression. Many of them don't even understand that there is a privilege, even though they're not part of their ruling bloodline families, but there's a privilege because of likeness of appearance. Certain doors can be opened to you. Remember that for those who've seen in Return of the Dragon with Bruce Lee. You remember that scene when they were going to this particular park, and there was this supposedly Muslim-looking guy, Indian Muslim guy, who had a turban on. And Bruce Lee was trying to walk in with the young lady, and he stopped Bruce Lee. No, read the sign. And what did the sign say? No dogs and no Chinese. Y'all remember that? No dogs and no Chinese. So Bruce Lee was looking like he was offended, right? And then all of a sudden a white woman walks by with a little dog and walked right past. And he looked and said, but she's white. See, that's that privilege you get. It wasn't like she was some white woman that may have been royalty or anything like that. She was white. And even though she had a dog, the dog got a pass because she's with her. You get it? And so Bruce Lee went up there and kicked the damn sign, right? And then he blowing the whistle, help, help, you know what I'm saying? But that's how it's always been. So certain of them don't even act as if like they don't even understand that this is a figment of imagination and that people just use this as a race card. No, that's the real deal. Cut it out. Now it says that one's ancestors are left behind and coming to America, right? That which they have gotten privilege from is through all the detriment, killing, right? Extincting, isolating, putting them in the corner. This is your culture. And yet, people don't realize that the teacher is now, as it says, revealing, according to the homework being turned in, it is being exposed. And people don't want that light shining on them because they can't handle it, because they're even throwing it back on their ancestors. They don't want that. So you are the epitome of culture, right? Now they say that a small c is the aspect of a person's worldview that are culturally determined, the shared assumptions about social interactions, identity, and nature of reality. So certain white people's worldview, culture can be determined by, them, learning about all these other cultures. But in that, when they're doing it, they see that it's not them. That's why they try to tell black people that in Egypt, those people were not black. They were white. You need that for your own sanity. You need to believe that in Africa, that you don't even want to. And see, that was that whole thing about severing up. Right? That was that whole thing about severing up Africa so that you can break it up to all these different factions of all these different factions of European and never see it as collective, and then isolate Egypt as if it's not even part of Africa, because there was no Africa whole. Africa has always just been pieces because each nation was controlled under another European force power. Get it? But you was trying to say Anglo-Sudan, Anglo-Egypt, to cover all that, to build that Aswan Dam, to cover all that culture and history of people of color. But ain't nobody supposed to have no conversation, no talking about none of this stuff, right? That ain't even part of the dialogue. So the shared assumptions about social interactions, identity, and the nature of reality. There is no nature of reality to a people who cannot allow another people to be who they are, and that everything that you would have to kneel to Zark, like in Superman, kneel to Zark. You would have to kneel to Zark because they would always be the parents. They will be your gods because they've been on the planet longer than you. Instead of you appreciating it and allowing to work in some kind of way that would be that you could benefit, but not run it in a way that is your stamp of approval. But you can't do that. You're not built like that. You feel like if you're not running it, then it's not the way you, and that's the other thing too. See, you can feel like you're intelligent. Let's put it like this. If Jay-Z said black everything, just imagine the world, and that element that they're trying to use as black crime as part of the mantra for the alt-right. There's plenty of crimes by every other people in this nation, but it's not being over-dramatized or dramatized or dramatizationed, right? So that it's only going to have the face of our people. There's times where the crime is so heinous that y'all have to show the ones that's you. But we're not seeing all the Hispanics if like they're not doing a crime. We're not seeing the Chinese. Why? Because all of them got their own and they know how to isolate. It's not like Jewish people are not killing people too as well, right? So, but we're going to be the face to keep that antagonism that stuck in the craw amongst that national aggression of those supremacist people as the on-code check, right? So the reality is that, again, going back to the analogy, when you talk about the extrovert and the introvert, the extrovert may have all the qualities that he has from appearance, sociable, right? Being able to get into parties and do all that stuff. But when it comes really down to who it really is about, it's that introvert. And guess what's happening here? The introvert is really not an introvert. He only keeps himself in the shell. But if he comes out, he's going to shine, and the extrovert going to become an introvert. You get what I'm saying? The introvert is only playing the role as the introvert, because if he becomes the extrovert, that he will become offensive. He or she will become offensive to the so-called false, fake, phony extrovert. You understand? The one that will go in other countries and then in territories where when historically you have done so much detriment that you will come in there and you will be saying USA, USA, USA. That's why they say them motherfuckers in the United States crazy than the motherfucker, man. That's why everybody's scared. You know, them motherfuckers is crazy, man. Right? Now it says all groups from cultures share assumptions, both conscious and unconscious, about what behaviors and attitudes are the norms for their members. The problem is black people can't determine that for themselves. Because of the dynamic in this country, how you have what they call minor and major, right? The minority group is a child, right? They're the children who were relinquished from their parents from emancipation. But they never looked at you any greater than that you've always been kind of the child. So a child doesn't really grow up in the eyes of the parents. They get older, but they're never going to be greater than the parents because the parents are older than them. In the case that how we've been put in this country, and that's the way they want to keep it. They don't want the child to grow up to fly from the nest, to create his own nest, his own family, his own ways, and even become greater than the parents. So a lot of people don't believe in that. That the student can never be greater than the teacher. If that student has other teachers and put them all together, he might be greater than the teacher. You understand? But if he's just solely under this one teacher, then that teacher will not show all the tricks. But if that student has other master teachers, it may learn something that the teacher did not know. And this what makes the teacher afraid. That's why he will not sanction you to go to be with other leaders, like that stuff that Dennis Rodman did that almost got them. And we don't know what happened to Dennis Rodman because he got reprogrammed too, right? I did that story. Y'all didn't see it. That's your fault. So let's go on. Now, they believe that when somebody used to, see other people's culture, white people felt offended like that was being racist. Because they don't have a culture. What is white culture? There is no white culture. So they're always on the outside. So they believe they didn't have no culture. Right? They do have a culture. It's just, do you really want to accept that culture? That's what it's really going to boil down to. Are you going to accept what your culture really is? Or are you just going to keep pretending that you're going to keep going with this mantra that somebody who's trying to build up your mind to, it's like psyching you up to fight Mike Tyson in this day, knowing you ain't got no skills, knowing you need all the tricks in the book, you need an anvil in your glove, right? You need to put some salt on your glove. You know what I'm saying? You need all kind of tricks to fight Mike Tyson, because that motherfucker gonna knock your ass out quick if you ain't prepared. You understand? And so that's how. This is the deep mantra within a people who cannot look at you and have to look at you lower, because if they allow you to get out of that cage of that thought, man, we're gonna blow up. We're gonna blow up, and we will look back at you and you will have to kneel to Zog. They can't afford that, y'all. So it says individualists tend to believe that each person is the master of his or her own destiny, and that her or his actions are all that matters in life. See, that's this thing that they got on us. They will be collective, but they make black people in this country be individuals. And a lot of us think because of this individual achievements and success that means everybody else should be able to pull themselves with a bootstrap. But that's just a finger on a hand. They understand the collectivism and the power of the unit, right? So they say collectivism see themselves as a part of a larger human system, focused on the impacts that their actions will have on the collective. We haven't learned that because we have had to fight so many different fights. It's like watching Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. When Mr. Hummer's right? When he did that, right? And all of them came to Bruce. But think about when Bruce was fighting them. It wasn't like 5, 6 motherfuckers jumped on him. It was, you go first, mop this ass, next one, mop this ass. It wasn't like, get them, all 6 of you at one time. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. But that's how we're being fought. We're not fighting like, okay, we fight you first, and then we're going to fight you next, and I'm going to fight you next. Everybody waiting for their turn. They all jumping on you at the same time. All your problems are being on you at one time, and all the additives, and all the other stuff, and all these subliminals, and all the hidden shit. All that is fighting. How could you ever be collective? And that could never be a focus point because it got you so divided. So you can't think like that. You can't think of that as a larger human system. You have to think that, how can I get out of this mess? I'm in a barrel of chaos. That's why they say order out of chaos. They put you in chaos and they're controlling their order to keep you in chaos while they're facilitating their movement. Right? So they say individuals often ignore or deny the impact that the system, racism, and ubiquitous negative racial biases have on people of color. See, the individual white person, right, the one that's not part of the national group, they say, well, my people struggle, and I pull myself by the bootstrap. I see people like Obama and Oprah, they pull themselves by the bootstrap. Well, why take the rest of you? Because you can't see the bigger picture. You can't understand that Obama and Oprah, through some kind of, was a bridge mode, right? There was a bridge mode made where there was affiliation. And a lot of that has to do like when they're in school and those organizations and things and societies that they be a part of, that they don't really expose none of that part. So that allows them to be, as long as they're going to be in submission to. But they're not individuals on their own merit. They are affiliated with something. And so when you can't see the bigger picture of that, you just going to say, well, everybody can do it because we did it. Again, you have a privilege. You have a privilege, but you understand, even that individual white person understand there's a glass ceiling for him when he's not a part affiliated of your bloodline. He knows that. But that's just that, get out of the race card. That's what I'm saying. Get out of the race card, right? So he says that, the struggles of his family, the struggles with adversity as proof, with enough personal, persistent people of color who spend differential treatment are blaming others for their own failures. That's what they like to say. Oh, y'all love blaming us. You can just do it. There's nothing holding you back. You see, that's again, this old world, new world. The new world makes you cut off everything of the old world as if you don't understand that the old world is systemic to this new world. There ain't no difference. It was just a continuation. So if you can tie those two together, come holler at me. Come holler at me. Right? So they say that some systems of differential treatment must be placed on all of those who didn't or wouldn't be in such exceptions. He said, now, the people that you see that they parade, again, that's like them dangling a carrot in front of a horse. As long as that horse think he can get that carrot, he's going to pull, I don't care how much weight you got on his damn back, right? Because he's enticed by the carrot. He think that he can actually get the damn carrot. Until one day he wakes up, and it normally takes most people that do be able to arise into those certain positions and powers. And if they're just going to be an everyday working Joe, to about 40, mid-30s, 40s, when they start realizing, what is this all about? When they start putting the pieces together, they start realizing, I'm stopped chasing this damn carrot, because that ain't real. But they wasted so much time in their life that they're too old now to do things. Right? So you're saying that the people who followed the carrot, that the treatment of their life, that they made it Well, they was on the only avenues that they had. There was no other choices for them. Because they were a design that is stricted to take the choicest and the best, so that those nations internal inside of this nation of captives cannot use that collective power to come against that which oppresses it. But until you understand that, then guess what? You're just talking out the side of your neck. So it also says that individuals means that one doesn't have to subordinate oneself to the needs of the collective. And that's where black people have their problem. An individual feel like, well, if they all out there, Black Lives Matter, fight for police, well, I ain't going to fight about that because I don't see that. That's just stupid. All you got to do is just acquiesce to it, and just regardless to all that, a lot of you are doing it, and then you start, reflecting it back to light on yourself. Well, y'all out here doing all this stuff. It's easy when you're individual and isolating yourself to the collective, is what they're saying. And when they say the get out of the card of the collective is when the collective is maladaptive and asking for a person for more of the person than the person wants to give. Well, that's those people that you see when people have problems with people who supposed to be positions of authorities, of stars and entertainers, and people be like, well, how come you don't say that when that position is presented to you? You don't say that. That's the individuals. They're not collective. Don't ask me to do something I'm not willing to do. That's not what I do. So what you end up getting when you do get them, you get somebody who's already bridge mode, compromised, right? So what culture do these people really have? Their culture is getting your people to create a culture of oppression, period. Individuals allow us to enter our own realities in ways that release incredible creativity and innovations. Being an individual, you could be creative and have innovations by yourself, but collectively of this game that they call race, that finger is only pointing, that's it. You need collective to have a make a fist so that you can make some waves. You know what I'm saying? So because an individual is not worrying too much about upsetting the group or the status quo, right? That individual, when is presented with some kind of serious thing of a situation, it's not affiliated with a group, and it doesn't have to do what? Ruffle the feathers of the status quo. Which they know that in the end, because of their non-affiliation with the collective and the status quo, if they do, it will be destructive impact on them. They know this. And so that's why there's a marginalization of white people who do what they do when it really, with the affairs of black people, they'll come out there and protest to give face, but there's no real organization of white people who go after their own people. You're not going to see it. Prove me wrong. Show me it. Put it down in the comment section if I'm lying. All right. And they know if they go against the status quo versus going against the group, guess what happens? They can get open more new doors. That's why they may just say some few, keywords, trigger words, right? That's like Democrats. They'll say the trigger words and keywords, but them actions ain't going to be against that system. You understand? So white people feel that they must be tempered with awareness. They have to be aware of what's going on. They have to make sure that they understand what our positions and what we're doing. That's their culture. That's what they do. There is no white American culture. The culture is oppression, period. So, the fact that many of whites believe that the only structure of oppression seems to be powerful proof of this, right? As much as they want to deny the fact that what I just said, that the culture of white American is oppression. It's in your laws. It's in the actions. It's in everything it breathes. I mean, even in the movies, you'll show a 5, 6, 7 people of white skin and one person, and that one white person, that one black person is going to be the representation of all black people, right? You put one, again, isn't it? It was in the 10-to-1 rule back in the day. For every 10, there was one, but in the other way around, it's for every 10 whites, there's only one black, equivalent to equality. Really? Well, again, I just want to bring this little short video about this culture and how culture bandits continue, and we're trying to come out of it. We're trying to do things so that we could be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and independent. But it's going to cost you, because they're going to use that dog whistle to make them dogs come after your ass, because that is what they're going to do. Well, I'm not telling you what I heard, y'all. I'm telling you what I know.